Welcome to Diced Onion, a Warrior podcast. This is episode 10. We're your hosts, Angelo Fioris and Mike Haggerty. Welcome to this ride that we call Diced Onion. Mike, I can't believe we're now about to finish up season 1 already. It seemed like so long ago when we started, and now here we are wrapping up what was an amazing first year of this show.
Yeah, a little bittersweet. I'm excited to be doing this, but at the same time, I'm sad that it's ending. It has been just a fantastic ride. I've enjoyed every moment of it. Such a great program. I can't say it enough. Just everything. I mean, even the costumes, the fashion, the clothing. I mean, I'm no expert on 19th century fashion, but it looks to me like they pretty much nailed it. The accents, the sets. I mean, not just the action, the acting, the writing, but I mean everything. And it has been so great. And I'm glad that the show. I'm looking forward to season 2. I'm looking forward to season 3. I'm looking forward to season 4 as a fan.
Yeah, hopefully there's a season 4 in the works. We've got the Writers Guild strike settled, but the SAG-AFTRA strike still going on. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine who is active in the union posted a photograph today on social media saying day 98 of the SAG-AFTRA strike. No end in sight. We're hoping that there is soon. That way we can start getting some of these actors on the show to talk with us a little bit about how scenes were shot and what the process was and things like that. But until the strike settles, we're not going to be doing anything to kind of break the picket line, so to speak.
No, of course not.
Well, let's get into it, huh? Season 1, episode 10. If you're going to bow low. Original air date June 7th, 2019, and it is our opening scene, and we see a guy, an older Chinese man, walking down what looks like a row of beds, and he is obviously waking people up. 5 o'clock wake-up call. My initial question was, is it 5 in the morning or 5 in the afternoon right now? I couldn't tell initially.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, as they say.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. It takes only a second to figure out, Mike, that this is some sort of shift change scene here. And we see Assam is involved in this scene.
Yep, you see where Assam ended up. He's kind of, I guess this would be his rock bottom.
Yeah, his exile, I guess.
Yeah, his exile. And he's in a labor camp, and he's with the other workers. And they're not exactly experiencing the American dream, are they? They are no. Yeah, they are working. It's shift work. It's grueling work. I guess they're sort of like day laborers of their day. They're just waiting to see if they get picked for jobs, and it's a grueling, hard knock life.
Yeah. Assam is in bed when the shift change guy comes telling everybody it's 5 o'clock. And we see that he's not only changing shifts to go to work, but they're changing shifts to sleep in the bed because another guy shows up at the shift change as Assam wakes up, and he climbs into the same bed Assam was sleeping in. So you got to figure these guys are working 5A to 5P in 12-hour shifts, and one bed to 2 guys, since they're never going to be there at the same time. And we see Assam is involved in some seriously hard labor, Mike.
Yeah, also, side note, back in those days, bed sharing was a fairly common thing. Like if you got like a hotel, for instance, or you stayed in some version of a motel, odds are you'd be sharing a bed with a stranger. You'd be sleeping next to someone you didn't even know. And so that, just to give you a little bit of a feel for how the times were. Not that I'm a historian or expert, it's just something I just happen to know.
That's interesting. I didn't know that bed sharing was more of a common thing. I guess similar along the lines of how taking in boarders into one's home used to be a thing, say, prior to like World War II or something like that.
Right. Even this goes back a little bit before the time period of Warrior, but President Lincoln raised some eyebrows because he would share a bed with soldiers or generals in the field, and not in the way you might think, not the way we think in 21st century terms, but he was just sort of showing his respect for people beneath him in the social stature. Like he was laying with the common man.
Wow.
No, not like a, again, the way you might make jokes about it, but no, it wasn't like that. It was just like he was showing he was one of the common men. And this is what this was. Assam has gone from being, I guess, a little bit higher in the pecking order as a gangster, and now he's no longer a gangster, and he's
a
lower
coolie.
in the pecking order.
He
Yeah,
is officially that we've heard the word a dozen and a half times in the first 9 episodes. Coolie, he is it. He is a working coolie now. And you wonder, Mike, now my initial thought during this scene as I'm watching him, and also let's keep in mind he's still pretty banged up from his brawl with Li Yang in the fight to settle everything in the last episode. So he's only not only doing backbreaking work, but his body is still kind of broken. And in my mind, the question was, why does he stay? Why is he even bothering and not getting the hell out of there altogether?
that's a really good question. He doesn't have his sister to stay for right now. He doesn't have his Tong to stay for. Really, what is keeping him there?
And this is his existence. Chow is there. Looks like Chow is there picking people for jobs, and he notices Assam. But the day ends with Assam going back to bed. He wakes up his bed partner there, and that guy gets up. And this is Assam's existence. End scene.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of is that when we go into the intro? That was the
Yeah,
opening
that's where
scene.
we go right into
Okay,
the
yeah,
opening credits for the last episode. And when we come out of the credits, it's Lee still in bed and still unconscious from the beating that he took from the Fung Hai. And it's an interesting shot as they pan across from Lee. You see a Bible, you see a cross, you see a bottle of whiskey, and you see Bill
you see, and
sitting
Bill's
bedside.
wife.
Yeah, Bill's wife comes in at that same time, and we quickly understand that Bill's been there all night, basically sitting vigil, so to speak.
Yeah. Now the question is, does Bill know what's going on? He knows his partner's in the hospital, but does he know? That was my question: is what does Bill know? I mean, I have to think that at this point, Bill does suspect it has something to do with the Fung Hai, but
Well, my thought
I,
was just the way he was talking, right, and the way he was behaving. I got the immediate sense of he was there out of obligation to stay.
yeah, that's actually right. Yeah, he did feel some guilt, so obviously he does know it has something to do with him. Some of his shenanigans.
Even when the missus goes over there to Lee and she gives him kind of like a little, pep talk and says, "You wake up on your own time, Mr. Lee," and she gives him like a little kiss on the cheek, and she asks Bill, "Any idea who did this?" And Bill says the most unconvincing no that I've ever heard in my life. I didn't believe him any more than I believed that Assam was willing to go have that fight on behalf of the Hopway when he said, "I will." Right. And
Yeah,
you know,
both.
and
Sorry.
once again, I get the sense that she knows Bill's full of it.
Yeah, I get the sense that his wife is not really buying any of his crap, but she's sort of just accepting it, like, okay, here we go again, kind of thing with everything. Like, I'm not going to get the truth, but at least I'll let him know that I know he's not telling the truth.
And
Small victories.
yeah, that right, small victories. And she leaves, and the camera pans down to Bill's hand. He opens his palm, and there is the calling card left behind by Zing, with the Fung Hai logo or insignia, whatever that he left on Bill's or on Lee's chest there after they beat him up. And that is the end of that scene. So we quickly get closure to all those questions that we just rattled off, Mike, which is yes, Bill knows. Yes, Bill feels responsible. And yes, Bill's lying to his wife. Kind of all par for the course for Bill as we've seen this first season.
He's a lie diddly ire.
Yeah, he certainly is. We now move on to Father June and Mei-Ling discussing the terms of the new way, especially focused on how the opium trade is going to work out.
Yeah, we're seeing a 19th century drug deal here going on, but this is higher stakes, and Father June is none too happy about it. I got the sense that Father June, he's just as much a hothead as young June, except that he's got just a more measured. I guess maybe he's seasoned, he's older, he's the boss, so he can control his emotions a little bit better. I guess that really is the main difference between him and his son,
Yeah,
because he lets her know that he's not happy about the situation.
that's true. And as we've kind of established with Father June, he sees the big picture the same way young June kind of does, but he's choosing to react with the measured tones of experience rather than to just fly off the handle and maybe wreck some things that didn't need to be wrecked. But he does make one thing clear to her, that if she oversteps even a single hair outside of the boundaries of this agreement, he is going to have her pretty little head on this table. That's what he tells her.
And that's where I got the connection with Young June, because that's something I could have imagined Young June saying.
Yeah, but like
Only,
an episode ago.
yeah, yeah,
That is very true. So that's kind of where that scene ends. It's Father June sort of acquiescing to the fact that he lost this, brawl to end it all sort of thing in the last episode, and that he will abide by what is essentially the new redistricting of the opium territories.
right.
But he doesn't like it, and they'll be watching her really close because if she breaks the treaty, they're gonna break her head. Uh, On to the next
Yeah,
scene. Assam
yeah.
is like right back at it again. There he is, breaking rocks, lifting heavy stuff, going back to bed. It's like Groundhog Day here for Assam. It seems like he's going through, it seems like he is just having the same day every day ever since he got burned out of the Hopway.
Nice analogy. I like that.
That's what it felt like to me because we're seeing him already twice or three times already, waking up or going to sleep, and we're only minutes into the episode.
It's Groundhog Day. I like that. I think you're right. That is actually a very good analogy.
I think they do a good job of giving you that impression.
Right, just showing you the day-to-day drudgery of his life.
Yeah, and when you compare it to what it just was before his big fight in the ring last week, it's a stark contrast.
Yep.
We now move ahead to the Banshee. At least I kind of figured this was the Banshee bar. And the bartender's there, a couple Irish guys hanging around drinking, and in walk a couple of black dudes ordering some whiskey. And of course, the racist Irish guy has to object, right?
Yeah, I love this scene. The way this
good.
scene played out, and it's another example of how you just never know where it's going to go, because this scene sort of, of course, right away, we're conditioned. We see the black gentleman walk into the bar, and we're conditioned, not only by these characters in the show, but just through our history and of entertainment. We see this. We kind of get the sense that this may not be a great scenario. But the bartender is sort of oblivious to this, and he's just like, okay, no, he's pouring a drink. But then the other Irishman steps up, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And then he tells them that it would be a good idea if they left. But then the scene takes a left turn.
Big time. But before we take a look into that left turn, it's interesting. As soon as the black dudes walk into the bar, like you said, you immediately knew, all right, this isn't going to be a good scene for those guys. They took a walk into the wrong place. But then just as it looks like the Irishmen begin to threaten and close in on these two guys, in walks Mr. Leary to change the whole tone of the scene.
And I was not expecting that. I don't know about you. I don't know if anyone could have expected that. Leary turns around, he says, "These men have earned their place. Give them their fucking drinks. They were brought here in chains."
You think they wanted that?
Yeah. And you're like, I remember the first time I saw this back in 2019 or 2020, whatever it was. I was watching on my DVR at the time, and I paused. I was like, wait a minute. Leary?
For Leary to have that much empathy and that much insight and understanding into the plight of the blacks, and to summarize it so succinctly to the other Irish guys and essentially to the audience was amazing. But this is where the real left turn to me comes, where you're like, wow, Leary's a pretty good guy. And then he says to the dudes, sit down and have your drinks, but you should have known better than to come into a fucking Irish pub.
Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, now we're back to Leary. And again, we see that this sort of pecking order.
Right.
We talked about that before.
Right. So Leary is not the kind of guy to step on someone because they're on the up and coming part of the ladder and possibly below him, but he's also not the type to necessarily set the table and pave the way for them either.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I understand you've earned your place, but you're not going to get it in my place.
You're in the wrong spot, boys, but we'll do you no harm here. Unless you come back. I mean, that's really what that said. Don't come back a second time.
That was the subtext, but yet another layer to Leary, another character, and I love that because you never know where this is going. That was such a great scene.
Yeah, it really was, and the scene's not over yet because as Leary walks off with his bottle of whiskey, he sees a guy sitting there at one of the tables who should be getting some rest because he's working on the Mercer steel mill job, but he isn't.
He is not, and now Leary finds out about what happened in the previous episode between Mercer and Buckley.
Oh man, it looks like Mercer has gone ahead and done what he needed to do to stay competitively in the pricing department.
Yes, and that means no Irish labor, but plenty of Chinese labor.
So Leary now puts two and two together very quickly that the reason that guy's sitting there drinking instead of sleeping for his next shift is because he's out of work, replaced by a Chinese laborer, and Leary is pissed.
Yeah, yeah, and it just goes to show you. I mean, here we are. We see this scene that's kind of it starts off in one direction and then it goes into another, and the other direction when it ends with the Irishman at the bar that kind of advances the story. Because if you think about it, the scene with the black gentleman, um, that really didn't advance the show. That was just sort of a little segue, gives you a little bit more perspective into Leary. But then,
Exactly.
okay, now we're back to it, and now we've gotten that new perspective on Leary, and now we're going to see more of Leary, and this is going to advance the rest of the show. That was
Yeah,
a little segue, and I loved it.
I liked it too because you're right. The whole purpose of that little part of the scene was not to show a couple of wayward patrons getting beat up in the bar, but to just give you that extra insight into Leary's overall psychology, if you will. But then it takes you right back to the Leary you know and loved, which is the pissed off Leary who storms into Mercer's office where Mercer and Penny are discussing whatever. And that's when Penny leaves and waits outside while Leary and Mr. Mercer have a conversation.
Right. And it's clear from the outset that Mr. Leary is none too pleased. Penny
He
can
ain't
see
having it.
that. He's not having it. He confronts him, and he's sort of respectful of Penny, but he's not going to put on false airs, but he's also not being overtly. He was kind of I guess that 19th century aspect where he's not like he doesn't say like get out of here, bitch, or anything like that. He's sort of
It's
again
best you not
Leary.
be here for the unpleasantness was like
Yeah,
kind of the
yeah,
way he was
a little
positioning it.
genteel, yeah,
Yeah,
and
not very well, but close enough.
yeah. So at least he didn't say, "All right, you fucking bitch, get the hell out of here." He was, a bit respectful. Um,
Yeah, he's less than respectful to Mercer once the door closes and Penny is out of the room. Once again, as we said, he ain't having it with the fact that his these Chinese laborers have replaced his Irish squad. And Mercer quickly explains that the mayor's office has been grinding him down. Leary don't care.
he doesn't care. It reminded me a little bit of that Goodfellas scene. Remember, "Fuck you, pay me."
Fuck you,
All
pay
your
me.
business
That's
got set.
pretty
Yeah,
much it.
that was Leary's "fuck you, pay me" moment. And
Yeah. Leary punctuates it with though, "You shook my hand, Mercer.
yeah,
You shook
and
my fucking hand," he said.
and then it shows that Leary lives by a code.
Yeah.
Leary in his own way, he's got more ethics than the politicians and the businessmen in this
And
show.
the
In
cops,
his own,
most of.
and the cops. Leary lives by a code,
And he
and
expects everybody else to live by the same code. And that might be one of his failings as like a person, as an individual, that, you can't expect everyone else to live up to the expectations you have for him because you're always going to be disappointed. And right now, Leary's very disappointed. And his message to Mercer is fix this today.
do you think that Leary maybe has, in a weird way, a kind of naivete?
Say it again.
Do you think Leary, in a weird way, has kind of a naivete?
I don't know. I don't know that he has a naive. I think that it's just that, again, like you said, he lives to a certain code. He knows no other way. And his expectations is that everyone else is going to dance to the same tune. But as he's finding out quickly, it doesn't work that way when you're dealing with politicians.
Right, and I agree. And what I meant by sense of maybe naivete wasn't the right word, but almost a sort of innocence, like I shook your hand, you shouldn't break your word. I mean, he knows he's dealing with a businessman, and he knows that indirectly he's dealing with politicians, and he knows that he's got to know deep down they're not on the same level as him as far as regards for a handshake. But I
Yeah.
think it displays a little bit of innocence on his a little, just a smidgen, just a little stain of innocence.
Yeah. I'm not sure if innocence is the right word, but I totally get what it is you're going for. We're back at Assam's Groundhog Day. It's shift change once again. It's his turn to get into bed, and we now see his bedmate, Paul. We find out his name is not in such good shape right now. He's got a big sore on his leg.
Yeah, he's not doing too well, and he kind of lays out his story to Assam and how he initially intended to work for about a year and send money to his family, but it's been what, 8 years, and the American dream has not turned out the way he expected it to.
Yeah. So for me, here's how I was seeing that though. Like, one of the things he was saying was, "Don't worry, it'll be okay. I hurt myself a couple days ago. It'll heal." As you could see, like it was a pretty nasty, festering thing going on his leg. Um, my thought was this: in 1878, and you're one of these Chinese laborers and you hurt yourself and you get cut like that, or however he got injured, and it gets worse and it starts to get infected as it totally did, and you could see the guy was already in bad shape. There's no protection for you. There's no hospital that's going to help you. There's no healthcare benefits. There's no empathetic boss. There's no foreman on the job who's going to get you some care. You're just eventually going to be brushed aside, and the next coolie is going to be brought in your spot, and no one gives a crap about what happens to a guy who's in a position like Paul's,
Yeah,
who is
no
now in
OSHA.
bed, right? But we go from that bed to another bedside, which is Lee's. Lee is still knocked out cold. He's unconscious, and Bill is at his bedside now, talking to him, and he's saying all kinds of stuff like, "You're a good man. You're a good cop. You're a pain in my ass, but I'm sorry for putting you in harm." He's totally sorry for putting Lee in harm's way here.
Yeah, yeah, and again speaks to Bill's conscience. And Bill is clearly struggling with his conscience through the show. We saw that with Damon, what happened with there. He's done some things didn't want to do, and now he's seen the repercussions of his actions on other people, which is worse, right? Because that's the thing, right? Sometimes in the movie, someone's kidnapped by the bad guy or told by the bad guy, "We're not going to get you. We're going to get your family or your friends." And that's a
Right.
little bit worse because that adds to the guilt. So we see Bill a little bit tortured here.
Right. And Bill is torn, his morality. He's torn between his own morality of doing good as a cop and as a human, and doing bad as a man with lots of personal problems. And his personal problems have his partner in an unconscious state for an indeterminate amount of time, so far as we know at this point. But that's when
Yes.
Bill says, "Don't worry, I am going to get these bastards that did this to you." And the very next, it cuts right away into Bill like walking into the Fung Hai casino, and guns blazing, "I want to see your boss."
And I have something to say about this. I have been dying to say this. Okay,
Go.
you said me perfectly. Bill wanted to speak to the manager.
That's true. He came into
Pete
the
Karen,
casino.
that's
He did. He wanted to speak to the manager, and he shows up at the Fung Hai casino. It's not
uh,
an easy scene, but he has to brandish his gun to get his point across to everybody there. And in comes Zing, just the man I
yeah,
guess Bill wanted to see, isn't it?
yeah. And Zing clearly, or very quickly, he disarms Bill, and
Real
Bill's
quick, like he takes the
yeah,
gun from him real quick.
and Bill's like, oh shit. All of a sudden, Bill realizes he's fucked up.
Yeah,
But then, as usual, the scene goes in a different direction. Zing shoots his own man,
yeah,
who
that was
Bill is
pretty
using
crazy.
to.
Where Zing uses Bill's gun to gun down one of his own dudes. For what reason, Mike?
Well, we don't know yet. But then he and Bill start talking. Bill says, why did you do that? And or he says, and he says something about a lesson. Bill goes, I don't need your fucking lesson. And then Zing responds with, well, I don't need your money. And then Bill's like, well, what do you want?
Yeah, it starts with Zing saying, "You owe money." And Bill's
Yeah.
like, "That gives you no reason to go out and terrorizing people on the streets or beating up other cops and that kind of thing." And that's when Zing says, "Hey, I'm here to, I didn't want to kill your partner. I just wanted to teach you a lesson." But the scene leaves you hanging, because what does Zing want instead of money? If it's not money, then what was the whole point of sending Bill a message? Because this was a whole setup. Zing wanted Bill to come find him. For what reason? To just say, "You owe me $50"? Clearly, that's not it.
Clearly.
We shall find out. In walks Penny into a bar filled with well-to-do gentlemen. There's no women in this bar, but she does find Buckley sitting there having a drink, and he's surprised to see her and says, "Are you here alone?"
Yeah. And do you think that he meant that in some other way?
Well, she responded, "I generally am." So
I wonder if he was sort of trying to imply something, but okay.
I think he implied a couple of things, and I think she understood his uh, his implications by her response of "I generally am," meaning the mayor's not much of a companion, and he knows it, right?
Yeah, and what was good about this is that you see two people that there's unlike Bill, there's no bullshit here. They're both putting their cards on the table.
Very quickly, right? And she's when she says she's generally alone, Buckley's response is, the mayor burning the midnight oil, no doubt, as if he's at
And
the office working. And her response was perfect. Talk about
and she
getting to the
says,
point.
if by that you mean what in the Chinese whorehouse, I think she said.
She says, "You mean whoring?"
Yeah, whoring. Yes, you mean in whoring.
Yeah.
And
But Buckley's response is great.
he goes, yeah. Did he say something like, "I pray that that's all it is"?
I pray it's only whores. The mayor has other unsavory impulses.
Yes, yes.
I can't even imagine what fall if as if going to the Chinese brothel wasn't enough, there are other unsavory impulses. And we've seen a couple of them already. But there's clearly more than that. But this is not what we're here to talk about, right? We're here to talk about, she brings up immediately her father and the fact that this deal is now kind of being changed, whether it's for the prices that the bid is going to be for, as well as the fact that he's not guaranteed all the rest of the bids either.
Right. We also kind of get a little bit of a tidbit here because an exchange where Buckley says that he encouraged Blake to marry her to help curb some of his impulses. So now we find out that uh, Buckley kind of played a part in their relationship, which I thought was just a little interesting, just a little drop they just kind of threw out there. But
That slipped by me. I cannot say that I caught that one. That's a good one. When she tells him that she doesn't like the way that the deal has gone against her father, his response was, "I suggest you should take that up with the mayor."
yes, yes, but she's like she thought she'd skip the middleman.
Yeah, I figured I'd cut out the middleman. She says
Yeah,
that is the line, and Buckley makes it clear that hey, again, talking between the lines, right? We're all here to serve the mayor, aren't we? I would imagine so, and I don't know if he's what he's implying there about her, though.
I guess if I had to read between the lines, I'd say he's probably implying that she, in her own way, is a city employee too, because she has a job to do for the mayor.
Which she's
In a
kind of
way,
not doing that well, by the way, and he says so, doesn't he?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, he probably has no idea that she has to roofie herself just to get through it. But
Yeah, but he does say if you were holding up your end of the bargain, the mayor might be home with you instead of
yeah, that's true.
at some Chinese brothel, right? So this scene is getting very tense because they're both really going right at each other's truths.
Yeah, in a way, they're kind of fighting it out in a similar way, like Assam and Lee Young did. In their own way, they're having a duel, right?
It is
There's
a
a
battle
different
by
kind of
proxy, isn't it?
yeah, and they're both kind of calling each other out on their bullshit. But
How,
then
however, they call each other out on their threats too, don't they?
yeah, and he says that he doesn't respond well to threats, and he responds. Then he says, for instance, you probably wouldn't like it if I told people you were recently seen in a Chinese boxing match,
Yeah.
and she says, "Go ahead, do your worst." She goes, "I dare you." No, I'm sorry. She said, "I dare you to
Uh,
do it." I
One of the things lost in this conversation as we're recapping it is that she does make mention of the fact that they're going to need some protection because of Leary's visit to see her father. And that's kind of what she really wanted to get out of Buckley from this conversation, was also some protection. And he made some weak offer of protection at the end of this conversation, which she didn't quite accept, did she?
yeah, she said. He goes, "How does that sound?" She says, "A day late and a dollar short." And he
Right.
says, "That sounds like the perfect example of municipal politics."
So, so once again, like you said, the cards were laid out on the table. Although they were speaking sort of cryptically in a sense, they really were being upfront with each other and with the audience. We now kind of really know what's going on here, a lot better than we did just a scene ago. We're now back to Groundhog Day, and it's Assam back to seeing his bedmate who is in rougher shape. And this is what you were talking about earlier. He's worried about having failed his family, worried about how he has not been able to make his way back to China, and more importantly, now he's concerned about his spirit because he knows now that he is in fact dying.
Yeah, and I would imagine that probably in those situations that those men had no illusions about their fate if you were long enough. Like you said, there you get an open wound or you get any sort of infection, and odds are, especially in that situation, it's not going to end well for you. So I think I get the sense that he's just trying to make his peace. Uh, I guess really say it, make his peace with God. Really, I guess
And
in
with
his
him
own way.
and with himself in a way too.
Hmm.
But that is where the scene ends. Assam is trying to be kind of compassionate and sort of consoling the guy, but
Right,
that's
and I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say that we're getting another layer here to Assam. We're seeing, like you said, the compassionate Assam. For the first time, he's really seeing the Chinese experience in America, and he's really digesting it all. And he doesn't like what he sees. I mean, who would?
that's a
And
good point. You know, he got to skip over all of that stuff from the minute he got off the boat and get right into being part of the upper echelon of Chinatown society. And now he got, careful on your way up because you don't know who you're going to see on the way down, kind of thing. And here he is at the bottom of it, experiencing it in full. Great point, Mike.
yeah, thank you.
We now see Mei-Ling and Buckley meeting in their favorite place, a horse-drawn carriage. They seem to like to have their meetings there. It seems to work for both of them. But now this is their first meeting with Buckley, meeting with Mei-Ling, with her being in full control now of the Long-Zhi. She's in charge for the first time when they speak.
Yeah, she's the boss, and but he also lets her know that, or she's making requests for opium,
Right.
and she's making a request for opium supplies. And he's also kind of letting her know that, well, you may be the boss, but you go quarter mile in any direction outside of here, and you're just another woman of no consequence.
Yeah, just
Another
another
Asian,
Chinese woman with no
another
consequence.
Chinese of no consequence. And she says something to the effect of, "A lot can happen in a half mile. Says you get home safe now."
Have a safe trip.
Yeah,
Exactly. Before we jump ahead, that was kind of how the scene ended, right? Their conversation was interesting because first he like salutes her, long live the queen, but then he wants to make sure that just because she has brokered this new peace, he doesn't want to see her going soft on him. The violence in Chinatown is all an important part of whatever Buckley's bigger picture plan is, and he wants to make sure she's not going soft. And she says, don't worry, I'm just getting started. And that's when she places an opium order for twice the normal size she gets. These threats back and forth to each other, where a half a mile from here you're nothing, and she says a half a mile from here a lot can happen, and she says it with like kind of a wink in a
Yes.
way,
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's being tested too because obviously she's not entirely respected by the people around her, and just like with Father June. I mean, I wonder if Father June would have spoke that way to Long-Zhi when he was still alive. Maybe not.
It's hard to say, right? They seem to have a certain understanding, Father June and Long-Zhi, as old men, but at some point that they scrapped. So that was kind of an evolution, whereas in this case, Mei-Ling has sort of shoehorned herself into the situation, and no one gives a whole lot of respect to the ladder climber, the Johnny come lately, who didn't quite put in the same grunt work that the founder of the organization did, right? It's kind of like the kid who inherited Walmart. Well, you ain't Sam Walton, kid.
Yeah, and well, yeah. Sorry.
That's all right. So that's kind of where I kind of saw that whole scene. Buckley, a little jealous that Mei-Ling's the new number one while he still sits puppet master, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's entirely plausible. I think, although part of me thinks Buckley's also more comfortable being a kingmaker. We talked about this before,
Yeah.
that Buckley sees that there's more power behind the throne than there is actually being on the throne, and he's established that. But my take on this is just more as I think that no one really has full respect for Mei-Ling, and they see what she's capable of, but they still, I think, on some level, still think of her as just a woman. Right. And I think that there's a subtext here about a woman trying to make her way not exactly the business world, not the legitimate business world, but I think that it's sort of a this own little feminine statement here. That's my take on it too.
We now move on to Assam, back in the crowd of coolies, hoping to be chosen for work, and he is not this time. Looks like the job is full. Come back tomorrow. This is where Chow is there again, and he sees Assam, and they start chatting, and he wonders why Assam is still doing this too.
Yeah, everyone's sort of surprised to see Assam going through this self-punishment, or at least us as viewers, and now Chow. And Chow's sort of representing how we're like, why are you doing this? Because that's what I was asking myself the first time I saw, why are you doing this to yourself? And Chow just kind of verbalized it. He's the audience really for all intents and purposes in this scene. And when he sees Assam and he says, and he and Assam are kind of going back and forth, and then it comes down to Assam's like just resigned to his fate. And Chow says, I hope I'm not jumping too far ahead here. He goes, if you're here tomorrow, or no, he says, I'm sorry, no, he says, there's only two paths for a warrior. You either get dead or you get better.
Yeah, I think you jumped ahead.
Oh,
this is the part where Chow kind of understands what you said, which is Assam is resigned to where he's at right now. And Chow says to him, look, there's a pretty decent job going on, good conditions, good pay. If you're here tomorrow, I will pick you for the job, but I hope you won't be.
Yes.
And that's where that scene cuts. The part you were talking about comes in their next interaction, and it is an important one. But for now, we're back to Lee's bedside, and he suddenly wakes up, and Bill is there, sitting at his side.
Lee's woken up after a week, after a traumatic injury.
We find out it's been a week.
Yeah, Lee's been out a week, and he and Bill are kind of going, you see the friendship between him and Bill really go to the next level. In this has sort of bonded them, which I thought that was nice. And Lee says, he goes, what am I doing here? He has no recollection of anything that happened.
Right. What happened to me?
Yeah, he goes, you got jumped in Chinatown. He goes, well, how did I do? Not as well as you would have wanted. And then they kind of laugh, and we see that the laughter is hurting Lee. And then Lee again asks if there's any leads or what's going on. And Bill,
we hope to catch him, Bill says.
Right.
Instantly, the scene cuts to a police raid of Chinatown, and they're rounding up anybody who looks like they're in a tong, pretty much. We see a Hop Wei flunky get grabbed. We see, like the faceless Fung Hai guy get grabbed. We see a couple of Long-Zhi guys get grabbed, and it's sort of a mild show of police force. They're not exactly cracking skulls here, Mike, but they're definitely flexing a little bit of muscle.
Yeah, well, it's payback. We know that story. If you mess with the cops are going to mess with you. It's
right.
The story of time immemorial. My only question is, were they tipped off, do you think, by Zing, or is this just retribution?
Bill's the one in charge of the tipping off at this point, because
ultimately it came from Zing, though, because he talked to Bill.
Well, you think? No, I don't think so. I think that the police are doing, whatever Bill gave them information wise, that one of them did this to one of us, so to speak. So now they're going to go out there and mess with the Chinese livelihood, so to speak, in Chinatown. And as a matter of fact, that gets confirmed in the next scene, because it's Mei-Ling and Li Yang who comes in to tell her of the police raid.
All right, fair point.
Okay. Right. And it's, well, why now? And it's obviously it's damaging to have the police coming in and upsetting things on the streets of Chinatown just when they've come to this brokered peace, so to speak.
Okay. All right, yeah, fair. And that also sets us up for that sort of propels the story forward a little bit in this case, because now we know that Mei-Ling is aware, and she's obviously not too happy about it. It's going to mess with her business.
Yeah. They know why the cops came in. It's not a secret that a cop got beat up in Chinatown, right? So this is now like unnecessary spotlight being put on them right when they don't need it.
Right.
Yeah. We move on now. Here's Young Jun walking with a couple other Hop Wei guys, and he finds Assam. Assam is, kind of hanging out in his normal spot, looking for work, waiting to be picked.
Right. And he says, Young Jun says, you're a hard man to find. And Assam says, I've been the same place every day.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'm not hiding. but he's not advertising himself either. But still, at the same token, when they walked in, I got the sense that he was trying to make himself a little smaller, trying not to be seen by them.
Yeah, I think he caught them out of the corner of his eye, and you know how when you don't want someone to see and you kind of do one of these.
Yeah,
I got the idea that he was kind of doing that. Funny that the first thing that Young Jun says to him after you're a hard man to find is, "A toy's worried about you," he said.
and he goes, "Did she say that?" And he goes, "Well, I had to read between the lines a little bit."
Yeah, but you do get that, without seeing a toy, you get the sense that she's still, she's concerned about him. She obviously has verbalized that at some point by asking some kind of question, right?
Yeah.
But Young Jun gets right to the point. He says, "Hey, I want you to come back."
But Assam wants no part of it, and I got to say, I don't blame it. Like you throw me out, now you want me back?
Yeah, he's not interested, right? And Young Jun makes kind of a case. He's like, "Hey, Long-Zhi and Fung Hai are a threat now. I need a guy that I can trust." And like you said, no interest from Assam.
No, at this point, for all intents and purposes, we get the sense that Assam is done with Hopli life, with Tong life. This is just what he wants to do right now. And there's a little bit of bitterness too, because he's like, he feels discarded. And he's like, screw you, you dump me, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, he says exactly that. Young Jun says, "Well, you can't just walk away." And Assam says, "I didn't walk away. You threw me away." And so
Yeah.
that's when he makes his point clear. He starts walking. He sees Chow now, right? And he's going to go get his job for the day. Chow promised to pick him. And as he's walking away, he says, "I'm no hatchet man." "Then what the hell are you?" Young Jun says. And that's when he's kind of looking from Chow to Young Jun and back. And you can see that Assam is torn, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point you brought up, because that actually kind of got by me. Yeah, he's kind of looking between both lives,
Right.
and seeing, and he's torn between. I mean, because obviously the hard labor world is not a great world to be in. Obviously, that's not a lot of fun. We see the examples of that. But at the same token, he doesn't want to be a part of the Tong. And my thinking on this is that it's like one of a couple of reasons. Like, number one, he's just done with that. Number two, he's probably a little bitter because he was thrown away.
A lot bitter.
Yeah, and maybe he feels that this is some sort of punishment, because we're seeing Assam in a different light. We're seeing a humbled Assam. Right,
Yeah.
up until this episode, he's been a little cocky. Right, he walked into the fight with Lee Young, kind of cocky, like, okay, whatever. Like, there's another guy I'm going to beat up. And this is the humbled Assam.
Yep.
And now
he has been taken down. As you said, he's been knocked down all the way to the lowest rung of the pegs.
Yeah, I mean, short of being killed, I mean, he's pretty much, he's in a way, he's dead to his old world, and the old world is certainly dead to him right now. So yeah, that was really interesting. Good you picked up on that.
So that's a great point by you as well. And he decides that he's going to go towards Chow. And Chow says to him, "Hey, it's nice to see that the Hopway hasn't forgotten you." Fuck them, Assam says. So Assam makes it clear what's going on there, and he asks if you got a job for me.
Yeah.
This is where we learn a little bit about the Chow backstory.
Yes, because we had seen the scars on his back.
Right, a few episodes ago.
Right, and we find out about his journey across the salt, and how he arrived what he thought was America, but was actually Cuba, and everyone in his boat was sold into slavery. And he says it took him about a week to realize he wasn't actually in America. And then we learn about Chow's backstory, and how Chow at one point was a little naive, right? He's not naive now.
Certainly not.
And he was there for about 11 years, and he says he left people behind.
Yeah,
but he had to do it.
Yeah, he had to. Why? Because he was not a worker. He was not an employee, but as he said it, a fucking slave.
Right.
And one thing that made me different was I know I'm not a fucking slave. So he got out of there. Yeah, however he made his way out of slavery and out of Cuba, he did it, and he ended up in the United States, which was his original goal, right? And you get the idea here. Well, not the idea. He's definitely pep talking Assam. And this is where that line you were talking about earlier comes about a warrior has only two choices, right? And those were what?
Get dead or get better.
Yeah, get killed or get better. So Assam, once again, we've established a couple things. One, he was very cocky till this point. The other thing was that he knows everything too, right? He doesn't listen to people. So you wonder if he's listening now, because his only response was, do you have a job for me or not?
Yeah. Maybe still a little cocky.
Maybe. But as Chow puts it very poetically, this is where we get the show's title. Well, if you're going to bow, bow low, I always say.
As his father told him.
Right. As his father told him. So there you have it. That is where the show episode title comes from. We see that Assam is, in a sense, bowing. He's bowing to his circumstances. He's bowing to whoever his masters are now. And he's certainly not the Assam that we knew for 9 episodes.
Not the Assam we knew and loved.
Nope. We're now back to the Mercer mill. We're in the office, and it's Penny with her father, and it looks like they're going over a bunch of papers, going over the books, and she is seeing that they're spending too much money, isn't she?
Yeah, she says she's trying to help out, but he doesn't want her to help out.
Yeah, she tells him he's got to renegotiate some of his prices with his suppliers, right?
But much like Assam, he won't listen to her.
Yeah, he doesn't want to hear it. He's essentially saying, but those guys had contracts, and she said, so did you. Go back and renegotiations. It's almost like it makes you wonder how he made it as far as he did in business. But then again, it makes you understand exactly why he's in the boat he's in, which is almost out of business, Mike.
Yeah, we see. My impression from this is that her father's not a particularly strong person.
No, and he's not a good businessman either, I don't think.
He's not a good businessman, and kind of makes me wonder how he even got to this position, because my impressions is that Penny's probably a better businessman, and she's tougher than him too, for that matter.
For sure. And she says to him, I didn't do what I did for you to kind of fritter this away. And boom, as her father says, and there it is, isn't it? I never asked you to do anything.
But you didn't stop me either.
And there you have it, going all the way back to now tying in that little nugget from Buckley earlier, which is he encouraged the mayor to marry her. Now you wonder how much encouragement he whispered into Mercer's ear to start making all of this happen. And then as we understand already the other details of the arrangements, which is she married him to help her father get this steel mill gig for the light rail or for the trolley car tracks, and it might only be worth the value of a single bid contract.
Yeah, and that was Buckley kind of pulling the rug out from under him, and which set this chain of events. It's tied in with Leary and with Buckley and the Mercer family business. It's all tied together, and it's interesting how they're sort of connecting the dots on that. But it's also kind of I thought it was pretty cool too, because the world famous San Francisco trolley cars.
Yeah.
And they kind of tying that in. I love those little bits of real history they kind of tie in, and they're like, wow, that's I appreciate that.
Yeah, because we're talking about a San Francisco before those trolley cars became part of its like iconic lore, right? It's just the genesis of the trolley cars, and this could very well be the story of how those first bids were given out, right? And that is pretty cool, because that the sort of the city hall machine was definitely behind who's getting paid to do this work. But speaking of doing the work and connecting more dots, Penny leaves her father's office kind of mad. And that's when she sees Assam. Guess where this is the job Chow was picking people for, to work at Mercer's mill. Right. And she sees him working there, and she runs over to him and says, what are you doing here? Like, happy to see him after she told him to leave. Right.
Yeah. More and more people are learning about Assam's fate.
Yeah.
And again, sort of like Chow, she's saying, with your language skills, you can speak English, you can get a job as a translator and be in a better situation. But again, he doesn't want to hear it. He wants to go through this.
Right. In fact, when she says, what are you doing here? His answer is same as everyone else.
Yeah.
Right. He's in that, like you said, accepted that he's a coolie. He's in that group of coolies. And when she says, I can help you get a better position because of your English, he says, I think we both realize this is my position.
Yeah.
And he wheels off his wheelbarrow full of rocks or whatever he was.
Do you think that he's sort of he's feeling rejected by her too? Like, if you think about it, he's been rejected by his gang. He's been rejected by her. He's kind of been dumped.
Rejected by his sister. Rejected by
all.
You called him a man without a country, so to speak, an episode ago, and that still applies, Mike. And now it's partially of his own doing because people have begun to reach out to try to help him a little bit here. And, you know, it's a combination of things. One, he's physically got beat up, destroyed almost, borderline death. Now, on top of that, he's been doing backbreaking labor basically since he's been well enough to do so. He's angry at himself. He's angry at the situation. He's a bitter guy. Penny ditched him too, so he's not going to be, full of joy to see her right now because, in a sense, she sort of contributed to him falling down that ladder of society to where he is today. And now she's part of the machine which keeps him down because he's working for her father.
Yeah. she is kind of his boss, actually.
Exactly. And that is where the scene ends there. Now we're off to Mei-Ling, who is trying to set things straight with the Fung Hai. And she's essentially telling Zing, he's to blame for all this extra police scrutiny now with that cop beatdown that they pulled.
Yeah, but Zing is pulling his own power play here because he says, if I want to kill 50 cops, I'm going to do it. You can't tell me what to do in his own way.
Yeah.
And we see that he's not afraid of Li Young or Long-Zhi or Mei-Ling. He's not afraid of any of them.
I don't work for you, he said. I made an agreement with you, but he makes it clear that the agreement he made with Long-Zhi was an agreement of convenience for him.
Yeah.
Right? So he's not doing anything with respect to the agreement. He's not looking for permission to act as the leader of Fung Hai. Not permission from them anyway.
No. And this sets up one of the coolest scenes I think I've ever seen in the show. I think this arguably might be one of the coolest scenes I've seen so far. Because at first he says to Li Young, goes, would you like to step outside?
Well, first Li Young steps to him like he wants to fight him.
Right.
And that's when Zing says, why don't we step outside?
Right.
And you're like, wow, are these two going to go now? Because we know Zing can fight. We know Li Young can fight. And Zing is just, wow, he's getting right to the point here.
Right. But it's not the point you think he's getting to.
It's not, right? Another one of those left turns by the writers. They do step outside, but not to fight, is it?
Right. And first you see Mei-Ling's perspective, which I thought was a great tease. She comes out and she's like wide-eyed, like she's just seen the shark from Jaws for the first time. Only it's not a shark, it is the Fung Hai army, and they're all standing out there just in perfect formation, silent, ready to strike. It kind of reminded me of that scene in Malcolm X with Denzel Washington about 30 years ago. Remember when he was at the police station and all of the Muslims were outside just in formation? It was a very quiet show of force. I got that from this.
It also reminded me of the scene in The Warriors, in the last scene of the film at the beach where they part, and there is the riffs all in line waiting to get their piece of Luther and his gang, right? The real murderers of Cyrus. So that's what that kind of reminded me of too. But either way, it was indeed the flex of the muscle that no one has stepped up to Long-Zhi like that. Not from Fung Hai perspective. And Zing's line right here is perfect once they see the Fung Hai army out there.
Like, oh gosh. Let's now talk about the terms of our partnership.
Yeah, why don't we all go inside and discuss the details of our partnership?
Yeah, that's it.
So it's so good because he knew what he was doing from the get-go. Obviously, when he got summoned to go speak with Mei-Ling, he prepared his next power move, as you put it. And it was, we don't listen to anybody else. We act how we want. And now we're going to pull some strings and dictate a little bit about how this partnership's going to go, especially now with opium being in the mix. There's opium money in the kitty now to talk about. So this is why Zing is also changing some terms, because he sees that having Fung Hai muscle has helped Mei-Ling consolidate her power a little bit.
Yeah, and he wants a piece of the pie.
Yeah, and you got to love the way he just pulled that off.
Yeah, it was a great flex. That was a great flex.
Back to Groundhog Day. Assam is in his shift change mode. He's heading to bed. He wakes up Paul. He says, "Hey, Paul, I got some medicine for you. I got some bread for you." But Paul is not responding, is he?
No, and it looks like Paul is no longer with us.
Not. He is definitely dead. And Assam, uh, it you could see it wash over him, right? The emotion when he recognizes that his friend is indeed gone.
Pure anguish. Great, great acting here. He, without emitting a word, you see just the pained expression on his face. And I almost thought he was going to cry. And I don't think he really did cry, but maybe a guy as hardened as him, maybe that's how he cries. And now I'm kind of thinking that he now has felt the full weight. He's had the full experience. He's been through Groundhog Day, as you said. He's done the drudgery, and now he's seen the true cost of what this can be. And I think this has really shown him something. And he's learned the ultimate lesson here. Like he now understands the price that is to be paid for the quote unquote American dream, if you're even going to get close to it.
The phrase I wrote down here was, "This is where it dawns on him that he has to choose better."
That's great. I agree. That is 100%, 100% accurate. Yeah, this kind of forces his hand.
And you see this all going through his mind as he picks up Paul and solemnly carries him out of the sleeping facility where all the Chinese are. And as he's walking through the very crowded area, some people are sleeping, some people are awake. No one really pays any mind to the fact that another guy is dead, just to hammer home or punctuate the fact that, death is run of the mill here. Life is cheap in Chinatown. That was something that was said in one of the earlier episodes. So right. Another encapsulation of that. We're now off to Buckley outside, being met by Leary. Leary's still looking to tie up these loose ends of the fact that his Irish boys have lost their jobs to the Chinese because of Buckley squeezing Mercer. And now Leary wants to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, and he introduces himself, but Buckley's like, "I know who you are. You're famous." He points out that he's famous for burning houses and beating people up in backroom alleys. And he goes, "But he says, well, you'll excuse me if I don't appreciate your moral indignation," or something like letting him know that, hey, you're no better than me. You're just a common thug.
Yeah. These are two men who are essentially out for their own interests. We know this, right? And they're not afraid to point that out to each other. But this is where Leary decides to flex that muscle, right? This is the contrast. Leary's big. He's burly. He can kick the crap out of almost everybody on the show, whereas Buckley is a gimp. He's got a bum leg. He walks around with a cane, and his power is strictly, psychological, Machiavellian, right?
Yeah, he's a Machiavellian type.
So Leary does what Leary does best, and he grabs him around the neck, and he pulls out a knife, and he threatens him essentially, and says, "This isn't going to keep going on." But Buckley really sums it up perfectly here, doesn't he?
Yeah, he lets Leary know about what the deal is, and he's Buckley in his own way is standing up to Leary, and right. he's basically saying that he puts it back on Mercer,
right?
And he's like letting him know he's like, "Look, we have the same interest here." He goes, "I don't like Chinese labor any more than you do, but I have to see the bigger picture."
Right.
And he kind of says almost what he says to Penny. He goes, in a sense, saying that, hey, listen, I don't tell Mercer. I mean, he doesn't say it exactly. He goes, "I don't tell Mercer how to run his business," but he kind of did.
He kind of did, and this is where he tells, where Buckley tells Leary that you think you're gonna influence state politics with a couple of fists and a pocket knife. So while he acknowledges the one-on-one strength advantage Leary may have in this situation, he also lets him know exactly where he stands on the political pecking order, which is way low. But Leary responds with a very perfect retort, which is, that depends on whose belly is feeling the knife.
Yes.
So meaning exactly what he's saying, which is it's Buckley's belly feeling the knife at this exact moment.
Right. He might mean, I think he means that literally and figuratively.
Yeah, he means it both ways. That's exactly right, Mike. He means it in the literal sense and in the figurative sense. But that's where the meeting kind of breaks up, and this is where we see an interesting reaction from Buckley here after Leary leaves him.
Yeah, I was really surprised. It actually may have surprised me as much as anything. After he leaves, he kind of collapses over, and I think he threw up, right?
Yeah, he starts throwing up.
Yeah,
From what we're not really, I'm not really certain what that was all about there, but
pure fear, adrenaline.
yeah, maybe sort of like one of them. We've seen it in other movies where someone comes out of like a personally stressful situation and their reaction is to vomit, right? I
But
think
what
that's
Right, I'm sorry, but what surprised me about that is given Buckley's past, he's a soldier, so I would think he would be used to violence, especially in the Civil War, which a few people were killed in the Civil War.
just a few.
Spoiler alert.
But maybe it's like a PTSD type of reaction.
Yeah, that could be true too.
Kind of what I
Yeah.
was. That's what I was kind of thinking here.
Mm.
But that is where the scene ends. We see Buckley on the ground, a little pool of vomit, and his liaison, "Hey, Mr. Buckley, everything okay, sir? What's wrong?" That's where the scene kind of ends. The next scene is the Irish thugs showing up en masse at Mercer's mill in the middle of work going on, and they are there for only one reason and one reason only, Mike.
They're there to eliminate the Chinese labor and also confront Mercer.
And to send a message, right?
Yeah, they're sending a direct message to Mercer,
Yeah.
and Mercer's going to know who this is. There's no mystery about what this is about. Mercer is going to know this is about Leary, or this is from Leary. They line up the Chinese workers, and they line them up, and you see they're going to abuse them. They're using a hammer. They're going to break their hands. So also they're breaking their hands so they can't work.
Yeah.
So they're basically saying like, okay, even when we leave, you're not going to be able to get any work out of these guys. And we're going to do this to probably to every worker you bring in here.
Yeah, this is a rough scene because they are not shy about showing us the breaking of the hands and the anguish and the pain and the just absolute, man, like you almost couldn't look at it. It just seemed so real when that big sledge was coming down on the guy's hand and busting them up. And they were one after another breaking these Chinese guys' hands. We see at the same time, Mercer catches this from his office window and locks the office door. And that's when Leary screams for him, right? He screams for Mercer. And that's when Mercer goes to his desk to load his pistol.
Yeah, he's trying to load his pistol, but then he suddenly has what appears to be a cardiac event and he falls over. And well, I don't think CPR was invented yet at this point. So Mr. Mercer is probably not in season 2.
Yeah, I mean, there was nobody there in the office with him. Leary only wants to harm him. So when Leary makes it up the stairs to Mercer's office, he peers through the window and sees Mercer on the ground already. So Leary now kind of getting his end result. And this is when Assam shows up out of nowhere right there.
Yeah, and this is where we see, I want to call this the rebirth of Assam. He flies out of nowhere. It reminded me a lot of Bruce Lee in this scene where he just flew out of nowhere and saved the day. And he starts just beating up the Irishman left and right. But he's making a point like the one guy, remember, he disarmed the gun from him and he took it, he pointed at him, and he could have very easily blown him away, but he didn't. And I thought that was interesting. Like he wasn't trying to kill them. He was just trying to, in his own way, send a message. Although one guy sort of ended up in the fire, right? Remember that guy was on fire, so he probably didn't do too well.
Well choreographed fight. Leary is watching from on high. He sees it from his upper perspective. And I wrote the same words you did. This is a very Bruce Lee kind of fight here. And that's when Leary flies in with a punch of his own out of nowhere. Yeah. He wants in on his action.
Leary was a little Bruce Lee-like too. He
totally
with a flying forearm.
Yeah. Yeah. And when Assam sees him, it's a great line because Leary says, "I know you."
Yeah. And Assam doesn't say a word. He just gets into a fighting stance and
the duel is on. It feels
like the duel is on. And I got to say, I probably was in some ways more excited about this than I was with this fight with Lee Young, because this was like, I wasn't necessarily expecting this. I can't believe in retrospect, I didn't expect that Assam and Leary would ever go at it. But here we are, we get it.
Yeah, they've crossed paths, right? And they're about to go at it. And like you, I'm excited to see this because, quite frankly, I'll be honest with you, Leary's just been beating up a bunch of chumps throughout the first season. So we don't know exactly how great he is against someone else who's great. but this is our opportunity to find out. And then the cops show up.
Yeah.
They bust in and everyone starts scattering.
Yep. And that sort of ends that. And
I'm going to find you, chink, is what Leary says to him. And Assam says, I hope so.
I hope so too. We all hope so.
The scene now cuts away. Bill is in a gentleman's office, his home, and they're speaking. It's kind of a calm scene. You don't know what's going on here at first. You think Bill's on an investigation, but very quickly we get the answer to what it was that Zing wanted from Bill earlier in the episode. He doesn't want his money. He wants him to do what?
He's the new Damon.
He's the new Damon. He's taken Damon's job. Unbelievable turn, Mike.
Not only does he kill the guy, but he takes his job, no less. That's not nice.
Obviously against his will, right? Bill would have totally probably preferred to just pay back $50, but that ship long sailed and Zing has the upper hand. So it looks like Bill is now the new Damon, as you put it. And he's talking to the guy the same way Damon was talking to him, isn't he?
Yeah, but I think Bill was a little better. He's talking to Jonas, this character
Jonas,
and,
right.
Right. And he's saying to, instead of like Damon was pretty heavy handed, but Bill is like, look, he goes, I need Chinatown to be peaceful and I don't want you to get hurt. Right. Like any like sort of gangster or pimp might say to someone like, listen, I'm looking out for you. I just don't want you to get hurt. Right. He's kind of like taking that approach. And he's like,
I know what these guys are capable of or something.
And also he's putting in like, if Chinatown's not clean, I'm not doing my job. So you got to help me out to help yourself and help me. And he goes, how much money do you have? And I think he said he had 20. He goes, I have 15. He goes, oh, if you have 15, that means you got 20. So give me 10. I'll buy you a little time.
Right. And the guy peels off a couple bucks. Bill does get the guy to peel off a few bucks in a much more, I guess, as you put it, a more diplomatic fashion than, say, Damon might have pulled off. But then this is where Bill tries to get all Damon on the guy. And he says, have the rest of 2 weeks or it's the White Mountain for you.
Yeah, he uses the line. Yes.
But here's the thing. Now, to me, I feel like Bill was just using the line to be flexing the Damon-like muscle. And it seemed out of context for me because damn well he never explained the White Mountains meaning to Jonas. He just used the line for emphasis.
It's a good point. We don't know. Maybe they're going to try to say that he's, you know what? No, I think you're right. He probably didn't explain. So that guy probably didn't understand that at all.
I almost felt like I didn't understand it the way he said it, even though we know the backstory. You know what I mean? Like when he said it, I was like, well, what, that almost means nothing in this scenario because that guy doesn't know what the White Mountain is.
That was almost strictly a nod to the viewing audience. I think that was purely for the viewing audience's pleasure.
Yeah, because you know that the victim here, Jonas, doesn't know what that means. So Bill's work is done there. He steps outside and Lee is waiting for him. It's time to go to work. And Bill asks him how he feels. Lee has a very funny Southern quip. Did you catch that one?
Oh, God, I meant to write that down.
I feel like I've been rolled hard and put away wet.
That it kind of reminded me of what he said just before the big fight between Lee Young and Assam. And Bill says, what does that mean? He goes, I don't really know. He goes, no one really knows.
Yeah.
I'm expecting him to say that again when he said this.
Well, I certainly tried to figure out what that meant. And I have no idea. And I'm not going to even try to interpret that one because I'm completely clueless as to Southern lingo. But anyway, back into Chinatown you go, right? And Bill and Lee heading back into their abyss in a sense, right? And it begins like sort of a mini montage here where the scene cuts from Bill and Lee heading into Chinatown, where we see Lai in Atoy's brothel there, twirling around a sword. We caught the inkling last week that she's pretty good with the sword. We see it even more now.
Yeah, and she's becoming an apprentice. So I'm wondering if she's going to sort of become like a bodyguard or an assassin. That seems to be the direction that this is heading. So that we're just getting little snippets of her, which is kind of interesting. I guess we'll see how this plays out, but I'm appreciating this as a little tease of what's to come.
This is all happening now. Remember, this is the last episode of the season. So all these little teases are all giving us a sense of what's going to happen in episode 11 and beyond when the show returns, right? Because we go from Bill and Lee heading into Chinatown to Atoy watching Lai twirl the sword to now Penny is in Mercer's office. You could tell she's kind of got the mourning grieving face on, and she's going through papers on his desk. So what you alluded to earlier, which is she's probably a better business person than her father. It looks like she's got her eyes on everything there, ready to kind of continue the work, right?
Right.
The montage kind of ends, and we're at Atoy's, and this is where Assam walks in, and it's their first time seeing each other in a while.
Yeah, and it was kind of a touching reunion. And now Assam,
you're alive, she says.
Yeah, she seems surprised, actually.
Yeah.
And her and Assam have a little bit of a reunion, but he wants to thank her for caring for him, and he's brought her a little present.
Yeah, he says, I wanted to properly thank you for taking care of me. I don't think that I did that. She says, no, you kind of didn't. The present is great, right? What is the present he brought her? I love this.
Well, yeah, and actually, I had a question about this because he brings her two of the guys, I assume, that were from Mercer's business that were assaulting the Chinese.
Yeah, the dudes that were smashing people's hands.
Right, but he had to run away from the cops too. So how did he get a hold of those guys unless he maybe caught them elsewhere later? That's what I didn't understand.
Good point. Good question. I wondered that myself. Like, when exactly did that happen between Assam scrambling away when the cops showed up? Where could he have run into them? How could they have caught them? All valid questions, but the writers decided to take some liberties with time and circumstance to present Atoy with this gift of Irish thugs. And what happens now, she says to him.
Well, at first she goes, what did they do? And he tells her what they were doing to the Chinese workers. And so then she goes and gets a hammer and she gives it to her goon and he drags one of the guys away. And the other guy's left there squirming in fear and terror. And well, we see that
the door closes.
Yeah.
Now, if you listen closely, right, this is where Toy asks him what happens next. And as that guy is squirming, you actually hear faintly, the scream from the guy in the background. So if you rewind that scene and watch it, you'll hear the scream faintly that the beatdown is happening in that other room. And I'm sure they're returning the favor of breaking hands. There's no question.
Yeah, maybe other things too.
Right. That's a good point. But essentially it comes down to Assam has had a reckoning here.
Yeah, and I think you put it perfectly when you said that the death of his bunkmate has forced his hand to sort of make a choice and to get away from his Groundhog Day situation. And well, he's gonna go back to his old life, but perhaps with a different perspective.
Yeah, with a different idea of what his role might be. And it's clear that he has chosen the Tong life again, right? Everyone has reached out to try to help him, and he's finally going to re-enter his world. And this is where we see, close-up shots of the black suit getting dressed, and the music kicks in immediately. The song is Little Green Bag, which is the opening tune to Reservoir Dogs. And if you know the movie, you know the song, you recognize what scene it's from, and they completely pay homage to that opening Tarantino scene with the Hopway characters, including Assam, walking in their black suits as Little Green Bag plays. And I loved it, loved it, loved it.
I was going to say that. Yeah, that was going to be this week's homage.
Yeah. And the end episode, man. I mean, what a great Tarantino used it as the opening song to the film. And here the writers and producers used it as the last song of the season. And there you have it.
Fantastic.
I mean,
kiss.
Yeah, right. No doubt about it. I mean, it was a perfect bow. Like you said, there's a hole in it here and there. Where did he find the Irish thugs from? But that was more metaphorical than anything else, right? Him presenting Atoy with the gift. It was just a way to further their reconciling of their relationship, I feel, by the writers.
Right. And you know what? I'll give them their poetic license. That's fine. I mean, that's just me being just an ultra nitpicky fanboy.
Of course.
Like saying, meeting William Shatner at a sci-fi convention, goes, what type of phaser did you use in episode? I was nerding out there a little bit.
I am sure I don't know would be the answer. But Mike, what a cap to what is just for a debut season of a series, you're hard pressed to get one as good as this. Action-packed, riveting, leaving the story hanging in just all the right places as we head into season 2, which I'm looking forward to kicking off with you in a couple of weeks. We'll take a short break. after rolling through season 1. But a couple more weeks, we'll be back with episode 11, won't we?
Yes, we will. Looking forward to it.
Me too. This was awesome. I hope that anyone who's watching enjoyed our recap of season 1 of Warrior. Make sure you make sure you subscribe, make sure you tell your friends, and make sure you keep an eye out for episode 11. Season 2, episode 1 will be coming your way very shortly. But that's it for now. You've been watching Diced Onion, a Warrior podcast. We will see you next time.